Mr. Sergeant of Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Love will introduce the chaplain of the day. Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. We have with us today the Reverend Dr. Anthony Singfield. He's a native of Nashville, graduate of Whites Creek High School, Tennessee Technological University, where he earned a Bachelor of Science degree in marketing, Vanderbilt Divinity School, where he earned the Master's of Divinity degree, and the Union Institute and University, where he earned the Doctorate of Philosophy degree in Ethical and Creative Leadership with a specialization in Martin Luther King Jr. Studies. Dr. Singfield has also completed postgraduate work at United Theological Seminary, Oral Roberts University, and Asbury Theological Seminary as a Beeson Pastor Scholar. Dr. Singfield has served as the pastor of Mount Olive AME Church in Lebanon, St. James AME Church in Dixon, Tennessee, United AME Church in Xenia, Ohio, Bishop's Memorial AME in Columbia, South Carolina, and St. John AME Church and Greater Bethel AME Church in Nashville. Currently the pastor of Payne Chapel AME Church in Nashville, Tennessee. From 2012 to 2014, he served as the presiding elder of the North National District of the Tennessee Annual Conference. He's also served as the Dean of Students for Allen University in Columbia, South Carolina. He, as I said earlier, the pastor of Payne Chapel AME Church here in Nashville, and also the CEO of the Daniel Payne Christian Outreach Ministries, inclusive of daycare facility, feeding pantry, and alcohol and drug intervention center in Nashville, Tennessee. He is happily married to his lovely wife, Christy, and they're the proud parents of Joshua and his wife, Michelle, Anna, and Anthony Jr., and the grandparents of August, Adelaide, and Alden. And I'm so grateful to have Pastor Singfield today. He's a good friend of mine and is heavily involved with also a group in Nashville called NOAH, Nashville Organizers for Action Hope. And now, Reverend Singfield, if you lead us in prayer this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Love, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let us pray together. Our Lord and our God, for the grace of a brand new day, we say thank you. For the water, God, that you sent from heaven to prepare our city and, in fact, our planet for spring, we again say thank you. God, we've gathered in this room in a day that you've blessed us for to do the business of the state of Tennessee. It is our prayer, God, that you would be very present with each one of the representatives in this room, from the speaker and each individual from each county, that every word of deliberation, every transaction, every deed that is done, every word that is uttered, might be, God, to the glory of your name and the betterment of your people. It is our prayer, God, that the down in this room would be lifted up, that the broken would be made whole, that the torn asunder would be put back together again, and that, God, that you would dispense heaven's blessings upon the state of Tennessee. Be with each member in this room in a peculiar and particular way, God, that their deliberations might be governed by your will, your way, and your great love for your people. Bless this day and bless this hour, we pray. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Representative Love will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us prepare to pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, man.
Ms. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Ms. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 92 members present.
Let the journal reflect Representatives Byrd, Carter, Potts, Lynn, Travis are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring Representative Manis. You're recognized in the well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I request that the Sergeant at Arms escort our guest into the chamber.
Mr. Sergeant of Arms, escort the guests to the well, please. Representative Manis, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I request that the clerk read the resolution.
Mr. Clerk, please read the resolution.
House Joint Resolution 409 by Representative Manis and others, a resolution to honor the memory of Michael Pasor of Knoxville. Whereas the members of this General Assembly were greatly saddened to learn of the passing of Michael Pasor of Knoxville, and whereas Mr. Pasor was an exemplary public servant and consummate professional who worked assiduously to improve the quality of life for his fellow citizens in numerous capacities, and whereas a career public servant, Mr. Pasor was a longtime employee of Knox County Clerk's office and served as deputy executive of that office under Knox County Clerk Mike Paget before joining the staff of Mayor Bill Haslam to serve in the Human Resource Department for the city of Knoxville. And whereas in 2018, he returned to the Knox County Clerk's office and served as chief deputy to Knox County Clerk Sherry Witt, and once again became a fixture at meetings of the Knox County Commission. And whereas Michael Pasor leaves behind an indelible legacy, integrity, and probity in public life, compassion and loyalty in private life, and diligence and dedication in all his chosen endeavors. And whereas it is fitting that the members of this General Assembly should pause to remember the bountiful life of this exceptional public servant and human being, now therefore be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the Senate concurring, that we honor the memory of Michael Pasor, reflecting fondly upon his impeccable character and his stalwart commitment to living the examined life with courage and conviction.
Representative Manis, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you've heard from the resolution, Michael Pasor was not only a personal friend of mine, but he was a great public servant and worked very hard to help many people get elected in Knox County, and also worked for the Honorable Sherry Witt. And with us today, we have Sherry Witt. Along with Sherry is Shay Witt, Cindy Warwick, and Bo Bennett. We also have with us this morning here in the well, Michael's mother and father, Carl and Sandy Farmer, and Michael's 12-year-old son, Kingston Pasor. My last text to Michael was on March 6th. Obviously, with COVID, there was no way to be able to visit with Michael. And I looked at it again this morning. And I urged him to stay strong. And that was on March the 6th. Michael passed away on March the 10th at the age of 46. It's appropriate this morning. I really struggled, since I could not visit with Michael, how to honor him. And so Michael would love this moment, and I know Michael is looking down on this moment. So I would like to make a couple of presentations this morning. And I want to present this flag to Kingston. In Kingston, this flag is to certify accompanying flag of the state of Tennessee was flown from the Tennessee State Capitol in memory of your dad at my request on April 13th, 2021. So here's the certificate where the flag has been flown. And we have copies of the resolution for both Carl and Sandy, and a copy for you, Kingston. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. Thanks, bud. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Wright.
No.
Oh. Representative Menace. Oh, okay.
We're going to have a picture made with the speaker.
Let's speak.
You want to go in the front?
Yeah, let's keep.
Welcome and honoring Representative Whitson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I get your attention. If you're a part of the baby boom generation, you'll remember this. 52 years ago, Apollo 11 circled the moon with 3 astronauts, and then 2 landed successfully, Armstrong and Aldrin. But the real hero of that mission was Lieutenant Colonel Michael Collins, who command module pilot, who flew around the moon over 30 times while they got the glory on the ground. But Michael Collins was just as important to that mission as any other member of that team. And astronaut Michael Collins passed away this week at age 90. He showed the importance of teamwork and what America could do when we work together. So I request members, we stand in honor and silence the memory of a great American, Major General Michael Collins. Thank you.
Representative Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm proud to welcome a loving family from Smith County, Mike Dunn and his wife Rachel, Brennan and Jackson. If you would stand, and members, would you make them welcome?
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to request and reserve the right to keep my plexiglass up. In spite of how everybody else in this house might feel, I take this very serious. And I would say to the rest of us, if you want to share the virus, share it among yourselves, but I really don't want it over here. So thank you for letting me keep my plexiglass up until I request for it to come down.
Chairman Dixie. We'll come back. Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I have your attention for just a moment? Stand. Will my legislative aide, Lee Andrew Smith, stand up? He's in the gallery. I want to take this time to recognize Lee because he's going to law school in the fall. I met Lee a couple of years ago when he was in college, encouraging college students to be more active in this organization he started called State Woke HBCU. And I was so impressed with his tenacity, what he was doing at Tennessee State University, getting his degree in political science. And so when I got elected, I knew exactly who I wanted to run my office. And I brought in Lee. He served 4 years here as an intern and has served as my legislative aide for the last 3 years. He is an esteemed member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. Lee, I want to let you know I appreciate you so much. You've made sure District 91 has been tight even through some of my toughest moments and some of our best moments we've experienced here at the Tennessee General Assembly. And on behalf of District 91, we want to thank you so much for your service. And I want to let you know we are pushing for you as you attend law school at Loyola University in Chicago. Best of luck. I love you. You're like a little brother to me. And thank you so much for everything you've done.
Representative White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, if I could also have your attention, I would like to recognize a family that I've known for a long time. And while I do so, Christy and Morgan and Drew, if you'd stand up. Members, last week we passed a resolution honoring Dr. Tim Goldsmith, who we lost last year after battling pancreatic cancer. He was 64 years old. Tim received his undergraduate degree from Lambeth College, where he met his wife, Christy, and his master's and doctorate degrees from USC. Among others, he was appointed to the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth. Tim served as the chief clinical officer at youth villages in Memphis for 31 years, impacting the lives of nearly 200,000 children with emotional and behavioral problems in 23 states. I would like for you to welcome Tim's wife, Christy, of 43 years, Morgan and Drew. Let's thank them for their life's work, their husband and father, in helping our state's most vulnerable children and youth. Thank you very much.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Speaker and members. One of our fellow members, Bud Halsey, his father fell yesterday and damaged his hip quite a bit. I don't know at this time whether it's broken or not, but his dad's 94, I think, if I heard Bud right, and is going into surgery today. So I won't do a prayer on the floor right now, but if you can, just reach out to Bud, throw him a text, and just be praying for the Halsey family. Bud has both of his parents. They're in their 90s. And at that age, anytime you go into a surgery is always a big deal, but especially at that age. So again, be praying for Bud Halsey's father. I cannot articulate that enough. It is not Bud. It is Bud's dad that has fallen and going into surgery. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish the House would make welcome my friend, State Trooper, he's a chaplain for the State Troopers. He's a local pastor, just all around good guy, Mr. Jim Enos, up here on the west side of the building.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow is a big day in the District of Champions, the 94th District. Many of you may not know that he loves to celebrate with ice cream after 11 o'clock and Pinot before. But the Big League Chairman of Commerce, Kevin Vaughn, celebrates a birthday tomorrow. I hope you will shake his hand euphorically and wish him a great birthday tomorrow. Thank you.
Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I just would like to ask everyone to keep a number of individuals in my district in your thoughts and prayers. Some major storms rolled through. Last night, initial reports of 40 to 50 homes have sustained moderate to severe damage, a number of families replaced. Suggest that you keep everyone in your prayers, and hopefully we don't have any further damage across the state as the storm system rolls through. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Representative Calfee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I spoke with Joan Carter last night, and her words were that Mike is not well. He's struggling. So let's all keep him in our prayers and his wife, Joan. Thank you.
Any further welcome and honoring? Chairman, oh, that's right. Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to let everyone know, especially Brother Love and Brother McKenzie, today is my 21st anniversary of being in the greatest fraternity ever, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And I just also want us to remember one of my fallen line brothers who's in the Omega chapter, Derek Young. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want everyone to, my assistant Josh's grandfather died yesterday, and just keep him and his family in everyone's prayers here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any further welcome and honoring? Well, today I have two for you to honor. One is last night I got on Instagram and saw the Black Caucus event. And I just want to say how much joy it brought to see members of our body having a good time out last night. And if you haven't seen it, just check it out. But thank you all for allowing me a couple of hours to watch you all have a lot of fun. It was very entertaining, may I say. The second thing, you can also go to Senator Robinson Instagram page too if you want an extended version of what was happening last night. The second thing is, I think my understanding is the ghost of John Wilder, we need to honor him. It was my understanding that he came into our chamber last night, somehow with some tools and screwdrivers, with some help from, I think, one of our members who exterminates bugs, and sort of redid our chamber. So I want to honor the late John Wilder for his appearance in our chamber late last night. Unfortunately, he left one up here. I can't understand why they would leave me out of the mix. But anyway, I appreciate you all taking care of yourselves and not looking out for me. With that, next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to resolutions.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There may or may not be guests visiting you on the podium. There's a little discussion going on whether or not some tools and might be headed your direction. So, Mr. Speaker, I move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar, referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory memorializing.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory memorializing in line that the next be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to bills, Senate bills on first consideration.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate Bill 739, 742, 771, 778, and 881 transmitted by the Senate be held on the desk pending third consideration of their companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration, petitions and memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, item 23, SJR 609 has been objected to by Chairman Faison.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In consultation with both leaders, all those voting in affirmative could be listed as co-sponsors for House Resolution 94.
Exclusion duly noted. Without objection, so ordered. Anyone else seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we are voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Let the journal reflect Representative Halsey is excused. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays.
Having received the constitutional majority, I declare the consent calendar passed. I object to the motion. Reconsider is tabled. Members, before we get started with the next order, just kind of an update of what our plan is for the day. The Senate is taking up the budget first. When they take it up and it comes over, then we will take up the budget at whatever point that is. Then our goal is hopefully take a break about noon or so for about an hour and a half, allow you to have lunch, and then come back about 1:30 and finish up the rest of the calendar that was here for today. That's our plan as of now. All right, next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Call it first bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 928 by Representative Campbell.
Representative Campbell at your desk.
House Bill 928, roll to Monday's regular calendar.
Without objection, roll to Monday's regular calendar. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1190 by Representative Garrett, relative to real property. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0881.
Representative Garrett moves to substitute conform to Senate Bill 881 without objection. So ordered. Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0881 on third and final consideration.
Representative Garrett moves passage of Senate Bill 881 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it first amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this legislation does is that currently there is no statute that allows you to place a trust, to record a trust in the trust's name. That a trust is not a legal entity, and so we're having problems with chain of title. So what this does is, if you have real property and you place that to a trust, it actually has to be vested in the trustee's name instead of the name of the trust. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I'll renew my motion.
Representative Garrett renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Representative Garrett.
Absolutely.
Is the purpose for this for the conveyance of the property so that the trustee, typically right now, the trust will say if the trustee has the right to convey property, but we're now moving it from the trust document to statute. Am I understanding you correctly?
Representative Garrett.
Not exactly. What's happening is sometimes the name of the trust is obviously different than the trustee. And so the registrar's office is having a hard time indexing those for chain of title purposes. So we're not creating any sort of conveyance. The only thing we're saying is when you, as the grantor, transfers a property into a trust, it actually has to vest in the name of the trustee instead of the name of the trust, because those two things could be different.
Representative Beck.
And they usually are, and I see what you're getting at now. Thank you very much.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the sponsor. So, for instance, if Dolly Parton wanted to set up the Dolly Parton Family Trust, this bill would not allow that to happen. You would have to list the name of the trustee that was listed on the trust, and that family trust would no longer be able to exist. That's what I'm confused about.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Absolutely not. That has nothing to do with this bill. If Ms. Parton decided to create a family trust under statute, that trust would have to have a trustee that would be the person in charge of that trust. And if it owns real property, that trust, it just has to be vested in the trustee. It does not prevent at all creating a trust for the purpose of holding real property.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for clarifying that.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 881 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Garrett, aye. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, no nays.
Senate Bill 881 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Pop next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 446 by Representative Warner relative to firearm laws. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Warner, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 557.
Representative Warner moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 557, properly second without objection. So ordered. Representative Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 557 on third and final consideration.
Representative Warner moves passage of Senate Bill 557 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as the Senate amendment. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Warner, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 557 will stop the use of state or local funds or employees to enforce any federal law, executive order regulating the sale of firearms, ammunition, or firearm accessories if they violate a state law or state constitution. I so move to renew my motion.
Representative Warner renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Leader Lamberth.
Now, Representative Warner, we've seen many of your classmates in the well before, and I know you've been on the consent calendar, but you seem a little nervous up there. Is this your first actual bill in the well?
Representative Warner.
Yes.
Leader Lamberth.
Mr. Speaker, it's late in the session. I know we got important things to do, but I think Chairman Vaughn might have at least a couple questions. He'll keep it short, Speaker, but if you wish to recognize him, I'd hate for this representative to not have the full experience of being a state representative here in the well today.
Let me make sure no one else has questions before we recognize the birthday individual back there. Anybody have any further discussion on this bill? Chairman Vaughn, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to Representative Warner. I just got one question for you. You're a contractor, I believe. That's correct, isn't it?
Representative Warner.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Is the name of your business Acme Pipeliners?
No, sir. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker.
It's not.
No, sir.
But you put that in all your cartoons. Acme, aren't you one of the Warner Brothers?
Yes, sir. I'm one of 5 Warner Brothers, but not them Warner Brothers.
I say, boy, good to see you up there in that well this morning. I'm laying out the funny, you're just not laughing at it. Anyway, sir, we'll be brief, but congratulations on your first bill.
Thank you.
Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senate Bill 557 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Garrett, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 71, 18 nays, 2 present, I voted.
Senate Bill 557, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1538 by Representative Weaver relative to the prevention of fraud.
Chairman Weaver, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1538 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Weaver moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to we request to move this to the hill of the amendments, please.
Without objection, roll to the hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1, filed as House Amendment 2.
Chairman Reagan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes the bill. I defer to the sponsor for further explanation. Move to adopt.
Chairman Reagan moves adoption of amendment number 2, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House is ready for further consideration of House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you are recognized.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. We move to withdraw, please.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Weaver, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1538 creates the Tennessee Cooperative Disability Investigative Unit. It is administratively attached or parked under the Department of Finance and Administration, the Tennessee Office of Inspector General. However, this new investigative unit is independent, separate, and distinct from any other bureau or agency in the state. Its own agents selected by the federal U.S. Social Security Administration and Office of Inspector General in order to commit solely to the investigative mission before them. The goal of this department is, 1, to combat fraud by investigating statements and activities that raise suspicion of disability fraud. It also is to ensure the integrity of the Social Security programs with zero tolerance for fraud and abuse. It also will deter fraud in related federal and state benefit programs, and the monies can go to rightful participants. 100% of this program is federally funded with no state dollars whatsoever. And as soon as the feds stop paying, Tennessee will shut the operation down. It is a 3-year pilot program, and the data will be gathered to review the tax dollars saved when this program is reviewed in 23 years, 2024. Members, I just want to close with this. We are tasked to be good stewards of the people's pocketbook. I believe that House Bill 1538 is a positive path forward by preventing criminals from taking what is not rightfully theirs to take and give the money to where it's rightfully due. I renew my motion.
Chairman Weaver renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1538 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Hazelwood, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, one nay.
House Bill 1538, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1547 by Representative Weaver relative to children. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Weaver, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform 1337. Thank you.
Representative Weaver moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 1337, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1547. That says Senate Bill 1337. Anyway, what it's going to do, it will move the needle from the age of 5 years to 18 months and be able to place these children with families who have a religious or medical exemption. This proposed legislation allows for immunization requirements for the placement of children under the age of 18 months, and the Department of Children's Services believes that House Bill 1547 is in compliance with the federal requirements. Under this law, infant children will still get immunizations that are required. And in closing, children, they deserve a loving family and a secure home. And this bill makes it easier for more families to foster and adopt. With that explanation, I move passage.
Representative Weaver moves passage of Senate Bill 1337 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you're recognized.
Same as Senate Amendment 1. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendment.
Representative Weaver, you are recognized.
I renew my motion.
Representative Weaver renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1337 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye 69, 19 nays.
Senate Bill 1337, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 902 by Representative Doggett relative to weapons.
Chairman Doggett, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 902 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Doggett moves passage. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt the amendment.
Vice Chairman Jernigan moves adoption of amendment number 1. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Doggett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What House Bill 902 does, we're calling this the Second Amendment Privacy and Protection Act of 2021. It does three things. One, it identifies and defines in code what a firearm registry is in this state. Two, it states that the registry of such is prohibited by the state and local entities. And three, it lists remedies that we as citizens can take in the event that this bill is indeed violated. With that, renew my motion.
Chairman Doggett renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Sponsor, you said on your third thing that it did, it gave the citizens some. Could you repeat what you said on your third thing that it did?
Chairman Doggett.
Thank you. Remedies. It provides remedies for us as citizens in the event that it is a violation.
Leader Camper.
Can you tell us what some of those remedies are? Are they listed in that bill? For the record, could you put that on the record, what those remedies are that you are referring to?
Chairman Doggett.
Thank you. They are listed. They are indeed listed in the language. I can read all of those if you would like me to. One of which is if a state or local entity, official, employer, or agent knowingly transmits to any federal agency, entity, official, employer, or agent of any firearm registry or registry entry, it's a violation of that is a E felony. Skipping forward to section 3 of this bill, or excuse me, we're still in that same, section, still in the same section, go to subsection F. There's civil actions or remedies that individuals could seek towards those state and local entities.
Leader Camper.
Mr. Speaker, I could not hear him. Could we go under the rule or give some order? I can't hear you. Either you're not speaking in the mic. I could not hear what you said. I couldn't hear him.
We'll turn up the volume a little bit. Chairman Doggett.
Yeah, I didn't.
Would you like for me to repeat what I just said? Okay. In subsection D of section 2, it states a violation of subsection B or C is considered a Class E felony. If you go over to, in that same section, subsection F, it states that a violation of subsection B or C may result in a civil action as well against the federal or against the state or local entity that violates this registry ban that we're stating. We're defining what a registry is, and then we're stating that that a state or local entity may not have a registry. Now, with that being said, there are exclusions listed all the way out through the bill for state and local entities. For example, law enforcement, when they have evidence, they have to log that information in. They also have to, if you're an officer and you have off-duty weapons that you carry, they keep a record of the serial number and those types of things that they'll need for those officers that are carrying. It also has an exemption in there for the state colleges and universities who have a record of individuals who carry firearms on their campus. Also for the rural school districts who do not have SROs, but a bill that was passed a few years ago that allowed them to have staff or members carry. Those are exclusions in there. The Department of Safety had some exclusions that we had listed in there, as well as Department of Corrections and the Post Commission as well.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chairman Doggett, I just rise to support this bill. I think it's a good idea. Also wanted to say I appreciate how you work diligently with higher education as it relates to campus carry. It's a very big deal in my district, and so just wanted to throw my support behind this bill. Thank you.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, I listened to the penalties that you've got in this bill, and I'm trying to figure out who's the most at jeopardy for those penalties. And the way I'm thinking, it's probably, we have the gun permit registry right now in the state that, our Department of Safety, i.e. our state troopers, are blue, our men in blue. So the guys that are protecting us and making our highways safe, so they would be the most in jeopardy of that felony. Then I was thinking with the locals, who would have this information there? And it would be local police departments and local sheriff's agencies. So this sounds like something that, we're more or less telling our law enforcement in this state, we're jeopardizing them of committing felonies by trying to help keep the public safe. So let's say there's a Waco type situation and the ATF comes in and they need locals to help them get some information so they know what they're dealing with before they go in somewhere where, their lives are in danger. So was your bill prohibit telling a federal agency what guns that the locals know are at a certain location before they go in to do a raid?
Chairman Doggett.
Thank you. And we have had many conversations about this. You and I have, and so I appreciate your intrigue. This has no effect on our law enforcement. There are exclusions in there that I alluded to earlier that specifically address those issues that you have brought up, so that we're making sure that our officers, while in the course of their duty and in their service, are not going to be subject to anything. Where we find this registry, the registry as defined means a record, possession or ownership by individuals or non-governmental entities of a firearm or firearm accessory, which includes but is not limited to the serial number, make, model, purchase date, or purchase location of the firearm or firearm accessory, or the name, social security numbers, or personal addresses of those individual or non-governmental entities.
Representative Mitchell.
But Representative, I'm trying to figure out who would have such a list if it's not law enforcement, because currently any information like that now resides most of the time with the sheriff's department in a county, or the troopers have it, someone in the Department of Safety. So I'm just trying to figure out who your registry and your bill would be referring to if it's not referring to law enforcement.
Chairman Doggett.
Currently, there is not a definition of what a registry is in this state, so we created a definition. We made sure to work carefully with law enforcement, the Department of Safety, that in their day-to-day operations, the things that they do not violate this. And so we've worked hand in hand with them to make sure that law enforcement are able to continue to do their jobs without being in violation of what we are proposing today.
Representative Mitchell.
Well, you may be thinking you're allowing them to do their job, but I think you're handcuffing law enforcement. Thank you.
Chairman Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just, refer back to the actual language in the bill. There's several citations of TCA code, and I know that every member in here has read through this language and seen it firsthand. So, thank you for your comments. I'm sorry that there's a potential misunderstanding.
Representative Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate the sponsor bringing this. With your background in law enforcement, I know you have crafted this in such a way that they're protected, that their purpose that we charge them with is carried out in its full capacity and to its full extent. And I really appreciate you bringing this for the citizens of this state. There's not a member on this floor that doesn't have a significant number of people in your district, just like I do, asking me about this very thing every single week. And we need this, and I appreciate you doing the hard work to get it to where it is, and look forward to voting for it. Thank you.
Representative Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 902 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 69, 23 nays.
All those in favor of House Bill 902 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 920 by Chairman Ramsey relative to hearing instruments.
Chairman Ramsey, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I would move passage of House Bill 920 on a third and final consideration.
Chairman Ramsey moves passage. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption of amendment number 1. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Ramsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, this is the bill that all of you are hearing about. It adds cerumen management to the authorized scope of practice to be performed by a licensed hearing specialist under the Council of Hearing Instrument Specialists. With that explanation pending further questions, I would renew my motion.
Chairman Ramsey renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the sponsor, can you please explain a little more detail what this bill is going to do? It's going to require people that remove earwax to be licensed?
Chairman Ramsey.
And I know, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know all of you are all ears on this issue. And what the situation is licensed hearing specialists have been licensed under the state for several decades. What they have encountered is oftentimes when they are fitting a hearing device, which we have somewhere around 800,000 people that wear hearing devices in Tennessee. When they are fitting those, they encounter cerumen or earwax issues that require them to interrupt their service. If you've ever had hearing aids done, you know that there are several fittings and you have to go back several times. If in between those fittings you have a buildup of wax, then you have to interrupt their care by sending them to an audiologist or a otolaryngologist. So what they have asked us to do is to include in their scope the authorization of performing the removal of earwax, management of earwax in very conservative manner so that they can continue the service. This is not a new license. The people that are going to be doing this have been licensed for decades, but they have not had in their scope of practice the simple removal. Now, this bill was written by the Tennessee Medical Association. It has specific requirements for situations when referrals have to be made for liability insurance and for issues that come up that require further treatment. So that, with that explanation, I hope I answered your question.
Representative Griffey.
So if, say someone at a beauty shop offers services of cleaning someone's ears out, or somebody else offers services to remove earwax for people, under this bill, are they now going to have to be licensed by the state of Tennessee to simply remove earwax and not performing any other audiological services?
Chairman Ramsey.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. They will not be able to get a license to remove cerumen or earwax. If it's in a simple scope of practice for hairdressers or hairstylists, then that would be a simple measure. Were they to enter the ear canal with any instruments, I would think that they themselves would have some liability in causing damage. And I can't imagine that they would intend to do that. On the exterior, no, sir. If there's earwax on the exterior, they would be able to do a simple cleansing without a license.
Representative Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the sponsor repeat that? I couldn't hear that clearly. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 920 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays, one present, not voting.
House Bill 920, I received the constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk. One more.
House Bill 1284 by Chairman Ramsey, relative to dentistry. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Ramsey, you're recognized.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 702.
Chairman Ramsey moves substitute form Senate Bill 702, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 702 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Ramsey moves passage of Senate Bill 702 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Ms. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adoption of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Ramsey, you're recognized.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is amended, has the intent to allow all dental proficiency exams to utilize non-live patients, specifically through the use of mannequins or 3D computer models with tactile response. This is merely an extension of one of the governor's executive orders that he passed last year to give some safety to dental examinations. With that explanation pending further questions, I would renew my motion.
Chairman Ramsey renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 702 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, no nays.
Senate Bill 702, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. I object to the motion to reconsider is tabled. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I make a motion to take up the appropriations calendar.
Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, item 1 on the appropriations calendar, House Bill 1153, relative to appropriations. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized. Chairman Kershaw, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I apologize, but just point of clarification in dashboard, there doesn't seem to be a separate item for appropriations. Is it down the calendar?
Calendar 2. Should be a calendar 2.
Okay, I'll keep looking. Thank you.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to my good friend, Chairman Kershaw, if you'll look on my desk, there's a vast number of white objects that are made mostly from trees. And it's paper, and those calendars are right here on the desk with no problem whatsoever. I just want to bring that up, Mr. Speaker.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0912.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 912, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 912 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves passage of Senate Bill 912 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Baum, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We request to move this to the Hill.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 2.
Vice Chairman Baum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 2 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 3.
Vice Chairman Baum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate amendment. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, move to withdraw. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 4 by Representative McKenzie. Mr. Speaker, it was timely filed.
Representative McKenzie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today as a representative of my community. My community has a high school, and I think most folks know since January, we've had 5 of our students to die at the hand of a violent act. And most significantly, the last one occurring within the confines of my alma mater, Austin East High School. we are a great state, but let me talk about that. I'm sure a lot of people in here view my high school, or it must just be a horrible area with violence and all sorts of things. It's quite the opposite. It's a residential community. It is diverse. Racially, it's a neighborhood with homes, with families. And you've never heard of things like the violence because it's never happened. Since its inception, since its merging, it's been a great school, and it still is a great school. We're just in a time of need. It's raining in my community right now. It's an opportunity for us to right the wrongs that are happening early enough in the process. So I've made what I consider a small request for 5 organizations that understand what needs to be done. They need to expand their programs to get our arms around the problem, attacking it at the elementary, middle, and high school level. So they're dealing with the problem today. They're preventing the problem from happening. These are great individuals that are running great organizations. And all I'm asking today is just for a consideration and what I would consider a small request from this state. With that, I thank you for allowing me the time.
Representative McKenzie, do you withdraw or move adoption?
I move for adoption. Thank you, Mr.
Very
Speaker.
good. Representative McKenzie moves adoption amendment number 4. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And while we all truly understand the challenges that face our children across the state, not just in our respective representatives district, but in mine and everyone else's, I would point out that there are 3 different rounds of federal education funding that have provided $3.9 billion in funding to the state. 90% of this is passing through to the LEAs. We also have over $900 million from federal funding for various children's programs. So I would submit, Mr. Speaker, that while this worthy cause, as well as many others, it is indeed worthy, there are other funding mechanisms for it. With that, I would move this motion to the table.
Proper motion, probably second. Parliamentary situation is that Representative McKenzie has moved adoption amendment number 4. Chair Lady Hazelwood has moved that motion to the table. That cuts off all debate except for that of the sponsor. Representative McKenzie, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I fully understand and accept the answers. I would respond with, this isn't a school issue. The last one happened in the school. So it's not totally a school issue is what I'll say. This is a community. We have to rebuild certain aspects of our community. And there's an immediacy to this. And so I would request that you all vote against the tabling this item because this is an emerging issue. And we have to be dynamic enough to understand that and respond responsibly. Thank you.
Parliamentary situations, Representative McKenzie has moved adoption of amendment number 4. Chair Lady Hazelwood has moved that motion to the table. We are voting on the tabling motion. All those in favor, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 65, 25 days.
The ayes have it. The motion to adopt amendment number 4 is tabled. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 5 by Leader Camper, Mr. Speaker, was timely filed.
Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, what Amendment 5 would do is remove a section of the base document. This is the first time, members, that this language has appeared in our budget document. We have funded ESAs in the past, and there was a line item dealing with that. There was a lawsuit filed, and we're still in a lawsuit. But what's different about this particular language is not only does it fund ESAs, it provides an opportunity to put additional funds in it on a recurring basis from miscellaneous sources. That's different. We understand and appreciate that the governor feels how he feels about ESAs. We know the lawsuit is pending and moving right now, but to change it and say, not only are we going to put 25 million there, but on a recurring basis, we're going to add 4 million. That's a problem. And that's why I want to move this amendment so that we could take this language out of this document, not fully fund and add to this item while this court case is pending. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of Amendment 5.
Leader Kemper moves adoption of Amendment number 5, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there's few members on the floor that I have more respect for than the minority leader. We just humbly disagree on this. The only body and the only entity in this state that can approve recurring funding are the folks sitting on this floor right now. That there is not a possibility for anybody to put recurring funding in a budget. Now, the governor's office can propose, they can suggest, they can tag anything that they want to, but only this body can actually put recurring funding. And this body made a policy decision a couple of years ago. Well, several of us were here that, a certain bill passed. And then there was a court case, and that is still pending. It is my hope, and I think a lot of folks hope, that that court case will be resolved in the next few months. We need finality on that decision, one way or the other, from the judicial system. All this amendment would do is literally go back into a budget and take a smack at a bill that has already passed and is in the court system. I don't think that's the leader's intention, but at the same time, it's just reopening an argument that we can come back in January, and if for some reason we don't agree with what the court decides, we can have a new bill, we can have a new discussion, we can go back into this. But the money is held in the budget to potentially implement that program if the courts were to uphold it. All this does is keep that there as a place marker. And if by the way, if the court case is unsuccessful and the bill is found to have issues from a judicial standpoint, then the money goes right back into the budget for us to allocate however we see fit next year. But the only body, no matter what language, that can actually allocate recurring funding is us, and we can't even bind ourselves year to year. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I will move this amendment to the table.
Proper motion, probably seconded. Parliamentary situation is Leader Kemper has moved adoption of Amendment number 5. Leader Lamberth has moved that motion to the table. That cuts off all debate except for that of the sponsor. Leader Kemper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Although I agree with the leader that this body is the only body that can approve that. That's true about everything in this actual budget. That's a true statement. And I probably wouldn't have a problem with the 25 million being held there because I do understand the nature of what you're saying. If the pending lawsuit goes in your favor, the money is there. But to keep adding money to it is the real problem. Because really about half of this body, although it passed, didn't agree with the legislation. So I think we should have some say-so in that. I don't think we should continue to put on a recurring basis $4 million, $4 million, $4 million. That's my real problem with it. I get keeping it there because we need it in case the lawsuit go that way. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't even brought this amendment. With that, members, I appreciate you voting against the tabling motion.
Parliamentary situation is that Leader Kemper has moved adoption of Amendment number 5. Leader Lamberth has moved that motion to the table. We are voting on the tabling motion. All those in favor of tabling vote aye. When the bell rings, those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 64, 23 nays, 1 present, not voted.
The ayes have it. The motion to adopt Amendment number 5 is tabled. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 6 by Johnson of Knox. Mr. Speaker, was timely filed.
Representative Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What Amendment 6 does is take the Mental Health Trust Fund, something that I think I've heard all the members in this body talk about the importance of mental health, and especially mental health in our school systems. It's really something that we desperately need. I've heard talk of more school counselors. I've heard talk about more social workers. We know that some of these issues are what keep our kids from being successful. And so what this amendment does is move that $250 million trust fund into the school systems immediately. Just moves it into the BEP so that it can be used. Because the trust fund's only going to allow, on the best year possible, maybe $6 to $7 million for programs statewide. You know, some of the larger counties are going to need that much for a program just in their county. So the reality is, if we really want to make a difference, if we really want to get our kids on track, we would move that money into the BEP so that we can begin using it immediately for all our school systems for their mental health. So I move adoption for Amendment 6.
Representative Johnson moves adoption of amendment number 6, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, probably the number one term that's come before the Education Committee this year has been the mental health of our students, because we know for the past year, the isolation, the virtual isolations of our children at home, and we're all concerned about that. And because we are concerned about that, there is a lot of money being put. The government administration's also put $250 million for mental health trust fund already in the budget. But to give you an idea of the amount of money going in, we're getting $4.5 billion from the federal government in Tennessee for our K through 12 schools. Can use in a variety of reasons. The total going in with a state appropriate is $6.9 billion going into our K through 12. Now our annual budget in K through 12 is right around $6 billion, $6.5 billion, I believe. So there's a tremendous amount of money going into our educational K through 12. The governor and this body is addressing that amount of money with the 250 already. Plus, this particular amendment calls for 250 million recurring, $250 million a year recurring, and I think that's very dangerous for us to go there. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, I would lay amendment number 6 on the table.
Proper motion, properly second. The parliamentary situation is that Representative Johnson has moved adoption of amendment number 6. Chairman White has moved that motion to the table. That cuts off all debate except for that of the sponsor. Representative Johnson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, it would, if it went into the BEP, it would be recurring. But I think it's critical, even if we do that, we used to be chasing Alabama in funding and education. Now we're going to be chasing Mississippi. With Mississippi's new huge influx into education, we're going to most likely drop another spot this year. And we're going to be chasing Mississippi in education funding. So the reality is, our kids, we need to make this investment in our children. We need to address these issues that are causing children to be less successful than they could be. So the reality is, if we are going to continue to drop in funding, you can name the big numbers and there is federal dollars coming in, and that's great. But what we can do, we have the ability to do this. We have the funding. We should take that trust fund and move it into the BEP so that it can be used continually by our students. I ask that you vote against the tabling motion on Amendment 6.
Parliamentary situation is Representative Johnson has moved adoption of amendment number 6. Chairman White has moved that motion to the table. We are voting on the tabling motion. All those in favor of tabling, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 65, 25 nays, 1 present, not voting.
The ayes have it. The motion to adopt amendment number 6 is tabled. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Amendment 7 by Representative Powell. Mr. Speaker, was timely filed.
Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So my amendment seeks to provide $2.5 million to the consortium of zoos and aquariums in our state. This includes 4 accredited zoos and 1 aquarium. These zoos and aquarium are centerpieces of a lot of different cities in our state. I'm proud to represent one of the zoos that's here in Nashville. We've also got some other strong zoos, one in Memphis, Knoxville, Chattanooga, and then of course the aquarium in Chattanooga. And I understand last year we had to make some tough choices, and this was left out of the budget, but it was left out again this year. And I know many different businesses and people have faced a lot of uphill challenges, but for zoos, even when the shutdown occurred, they still had very high fixed cost because you still have to feed and care for the animals. And so they still had to bear that burden of making sure to take care of the animals. And, a couple of zoos here in our state where it's significant risk of, in fact, perhaps even becoming wards of the state or the cities where they reside. So it's a very important issue to me, and I think to a lot of us that have zoos in our communities, and should be important to every member of this body in this chamber, because zoos, again, are a centerpiece of a billion-dollar tourism industry in the state of Tennessee. I want to thank the chair lady. We've had some conversations since I've introduced this resolution and amendment, and I think that part of this was hopefully an oversight, and given the fact that we have funded this in the past, we've had some good discussions. I know, in fact, she's got a zoo and an aquarium in her own neck of the woods, and so she's committed to me to continue to work on this issue, give me those assurances. And my hope is we can not even make sure that this is a one-time funding, but make this a reoccurring, because the zoos and aquariums are very important to our state. So I thank the chair lady for that commitment, and hopefully we can all work forward toward that in the future. And with that, I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 7 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 8 by Representative Mitchell. Mr. Speaker, was timely filed.
Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, my amendment is just to take out $4.2 million in this budget for 2 nonprofits, one from Florida and one from Frisco, Texas. So I know everyone in this room has not-for-profits within your district, and they're all struggling to make payroll most of the time. But funny to me, we got $4.2 million that we can send out of state to pay employees out of state, while Tennesseans can't get this $4.2 million. So I'm just asking you, I'm not asking for the $4.2 million to come to my area or my pet project, but I would like the $4.2 million spent on Tennesseans instead of somewhere in Florida or somewhere in Texas. I put in the appropriations amendment for $1 million for blind children who are born blind in the state, but we don't have money for them. But we've got $4.2 million to send out of state. So if you want to vote to table my amendment, go ahead. But when you go home and those not-for-profits are calling you and asking you, why didn't you fund my organization? Well, tell them it's in Texas. You sent their money to Texas, and you sent their money to Tim Tebow in Florida. So you just go ahead and do that. But like I said, $4.2 million of Tennessean taxpayer dollars should not go out of state. So find your pet project and get it in your area, but I don't want to send our money to Texas and to Florida. With that being said, I renew my motion. Thank you.
Representative Mitchell moves adoption of amendment number 8, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, over the last several years, and starting with our good friend, Representative Jim Coley, and even this year with our friend, the representative from Shelby County, we've passed bills on sex trafficking. We've passed bills with the chairlady from Dixon and Cheatham County that come after some actors who have done nothing but seek to destroy and devastate children's lives. The gentleman from Davidson County wants to take out money appropriated for organizations that supposedly aren't from Tennessee. But if you would do yourself a favor and look at what these organizations do and what they offer to children and girls who have been raped and pillaged and traded and sex trafficked. The Tim Tebow Foundation will actually complement and corroborate with providers from East Tennessee to West Tennessee. And if you do some looking, you're going to find out that there's places in Tennessee that need help, that need somebody to partner with them, not to compete with them, but to somebody to come along and compete and corroborate with them, complement the ministry and the Lord's work that they're doing. When you look at the needs of our children in this state and realize that there are places in this state that need this exact program that the governor has proposed, you will not only vote against him for the table motion, but you'll let them know this is exactly what the state of Tennessee needs. This is exactly what the young girls and children need in Tennessee. And so, Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to move his amendment to the table.
Proper motion, probably second in the parliamentary situation, is Representative Mitchell has moved adoption of amendment number 8. Chairman Faison has moved that motion to the table. That cuts off all debate except for that of the sponsor. Representative Mitchell is recognized. There's no other discussion, Representative.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And everything he said is great. If there wasn't organizations in this state that do the exact same thing that these organizations are struggling, there's one, someone just brought to me the information, whoever represents Lebanon, Tennessee, there's a nice not-for-profit there called Rest Stop Ministries that fights sex trafficking. As well as we have a nice little organization in this state called the TBI. I'm sure they would like some more money to operate, to be able to do that. You know, so I don't need to send Tennesseans money to Florida and to Texas when there's Tennesseans doing the exact same thing. And if you want to send your money out of state, have at it. But I'm going to defend Tennessee taxpayers, and I'm going to keep Tennessee taxpayer dollars at home, paying Tennesseans and doing good works in Tennessee. So with that being said, I renew my motion.
Well, that's not a proper motion, but the parliamentary situation is Representative Mitchell has moved adoption of amendment number 8. Chairman Faison has moved that motion to the table. We're voting on the tabling motion. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 65, 25 nays.
The ayes have it. The motion to adopt amendment number 8 is tabled. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, House Amendment number 9 by Representative Hakeem. Mr. Speaker, this amendment was not timely filed. The sponsor gets a 1-minute explanation.
Representative Hakeem, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendments that I have are a statewide application. It affords an opportunity for trusted leaders within communities to assist in transforming lives. One of these amendments has been funded in the past, and it's an example of what our future can look like when we work together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Do you withdraw or do you try to move?
I apologize.
Which direction are we going?
Move to adopt.
Move to adopt. To consider, sorry, move to consider.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir. You've heard the motion. We are voting for consideration of amendment number 9. All those in favor of considering amendment number 9, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change the vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 24, 65 nays.
In accordance with Rule 60B, having failed to receive the necessary two-thirds vote, the motion to consider amendment number 9 fails. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 10 by Representative Hakeem. Mr. Speaker, was not timely filed. The sponsor is allowed a 1-minute explanation.
Representative Hakeem, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my colleagues, I truly thank you for this opportunity. Bearing in mind votes we just had, I will withdraw. Thank you so very much.
Without objection, withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 11 by Leader Lamberth. Mr. Speaker, was not timely filed. The sponsor is allowed a 1-minute explanation.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Has been going back and forth with the administrative office of the courts for quite some time, and they have finally come to an accord that if that bill were to be successful, it would actually cost $2 million instead of the just over $1 million that is currently in the budget document. I do apologize to the members that this comes as an amendment today, but that is the only way to actually fix this particular glitch. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would move consideration of the amendment.
You've heard the motion. We are voting for consideration of amendment number 11. All those in favor of considering amendment number 11, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change your vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 69, 21 nays.
In accordance with Rule 60B, having received the necessary two-thirds vote, the motion to consider amendment number 11 prevails. Leader Lamberth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've explained the amendment. I would move adoption.
Leader Lamberth moves adoption of amendment number 11. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I actually rise in support of this amendment because it funds a terrible idea. But if we're going to pass legislation that is requiring funds, then we obviously need to fund them. But I would say that even with this amendment, we're falling $172,145 short of the amount of money that the AOC's office said that this terrible bill would require. And I'd also show to my colleagues that the limited funding that was in the proposed budget evidences the lack of support by the governor's administration. I don't think that this body's heart is in the legislation that this funding supports. I just don't get the sense that we've already passed another bill that already directly contradicts this super chancery court. I don't get the sense that this body's heart's in this bill that we're funding. And then we in the House at times pride ourselves for standing up to the Senate and checking what can be fairly described sometimes as a sense of self-importance. I think this super chancery court, which has originated down the hall, is a terrible idea, but it's a prime opportunity for this body to draw a line in the marble in the rotunda and say enough is enough. I support this amendment because it almost fully funds this super chancery court. And if we're going to pass something like that, which I don't think we should, then you at least have to fund judges' office space and assistants and law clerks, travel expenses, and the like. But I urge you to support this amendment, but let's kill the legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
One second. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to my friend from Davidson County, thank you for your support of this amendment. We will obviously have plenty of time to debate the other piece of legislation on the floor, and I think it is an important debate for us to have. So any issues with the fiscal note actually would need to be directed toward fiscal review. The governor's office does not prepare fiscal notes for us. Our fiscal review office, which is an objective, independent body for a reason, does that. So thank you for your comments and thank you for your support of this amendment. And it is well said that if that bill were to be successful, it needs to be as close to fully funded as we can possibly get.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quite frankly, I would yield the remainder of my time to Representative Clemens because he made a great argument on why we should not even support this particular amendment to fund this bad bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you for those comments, but I actually think that may be a mischaracterization of the representative from Davidson County's comments. He rose in support of the amendment and opposed to the bill, because if there's even a chance of the bill being successful, which there very well may be, I've not seen the final amended form, you would hate to underfund even what our friend from Davidson County believes is a very bad idea. It needs to at least have full funding in the budget for it. So that's my only response to that, is I actually think this has pretty broad support on the amendment for this, and then the bill can be debated later.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Hang on. Is there anybody else before? Hang on. Representative Clemens.
Yeah, my name is called, so I just thought I'd take the opportunity to say what a bad piece of legislation this is. I mean, let's check the Senate on this. I mean, pass the budget amendment, whatever you got to do, but this super chancery court is nonsense. So let's draw a line in the marble out here, please. Thank you.
That would be vandalism and be a crime. Next, anybody else? Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to rise in support of fiscal review and the great job they do. I know we hammer them a lot of times and try to get those fiscal notes down as low as possible, but sometimes we have to go back and raise a little funding. So thank you for the great work they do for the state of Tennessee.
Out of order. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we're going to be on the board, members. We'll be on the board. All those in favor of amendment number 11, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 73, 20 nays.
Amendment number 11 adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Speaker, that brings the body back to the heel of the amendments, House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Baum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate Amendment number 1, move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairlady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chairlady Hazelwood renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam Chair Hazelwood, Chairman Hicks, thank you for all the hard work on this, and I've expressed this concern to both of you. We have a committee process in this House, and we trust that bills work their way through the committee, and that committee has an opportunity to fully vet. We deliberate on bills for weeks. We send it back to change one word if we disagree with it. And I would hope in the future, and this is no indication of my feelings of this budget or the appropriations budget, but I would hope in the future that we would get more than the day that we sit down to vote on the appropriations budget, that we have more time to deliberate, and that we have time to ask questions and go through the process. I understand it's a moving document and there's a lot of negotiations, but I just hope in the future we have a little bit more time to deliberate the appropriations budget. So, thank you.
Chairlady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the comments. I know we have been working, and Representative Freeman has worked very hard as a member of that Finance Committee. The process is the process, and we do the best we can, but there's a lot of late-breaking information. There are bills that are being passed as we are working, so we get the information out as quickly as we possibly can. And I want to take a moment here to just recognize Peter Miller, Myrna Turnich, and Krista and her team with Fiscal Review, and our attorney Joel Hayes, because without their work, this budget could not happen. So whatever we do or talk about today, just remember that those are the folks who have been working late nights. We think we work late nights, but when we leave, they've still got work to do. So before I forget, thank you to the team. So let's talk about this budget that we have been working on since we came in January. It's a $46.2 billion budget. That's a lot of money, but when we sat down and worked on this budget, we did it in the Tennessee way. We worked on our budget for the state, just like we work on our family budgets at home. We look at the money that we have, we look at the obligations that we have, we look at the priorities that we have. And just like when you're having family budget discussions, everybody's priorities didn't initially match up. The Senate had some priorities that perhaps we didn't share. The governor and administration had some priorities that we probably didn't share. And so we had a lot of discussion to come to the point where we are today. And I've already misspoken, so let me correct that. It's a $42.6 billion budget. I think my dyslexia kicked in and I transposed some numbers, so I apologize. But when we're looking at this budget, when we're looking at the dollars that we have available in Tennessee, and when we're determining how we should best spend those dollars, whether the state has been led by Republicans or Democrats, whether it's been a blue state or a red state, it's always been a fiscally conservative state. And we continue that heritage with this budget. And conservative budgeting will tell you the first thing that you do when you look at your budget is you pay yourself. We have done that. If you remember when the governor presented his budget, there was $50 million additional dollars going into the rainy day fund. We have increased that by another $50 million, which means that our Tennessee rainy day fund will now be $1.55 billion. Feel free. That's a great deal of money. It's still less than 30 days operating expenses if the world shut down and Tennessee had to operate on its own. So, but it gets us in a good place. And I am proud of our rainy day fund and our whole budget, frankly, as compared to the other states in this union. And definitely we're head and shoulders above what the federal government does. That's another story. The second thing that you do when you're budgeting for your family is you take care of your obligations. You pay your bills. The biggest liability that the state of Tennessee has is our pension fund. That's the TCRS fund that all state employees, most of our teachers, other county employees, other folks across the state have paid into in good faith. We have promised that when they retire, the money will be there for them to do that. We base the state's input into that fund each year, determined by actuarial expectations of what the dollars already in that fund can earn and add to. The forecasters are telling us that we can expect a reduction in those earnings. That means that there would be a hole in our pension plan if we didn't plug it. In order to plug it, we could do that a couple of ways. We could put a $60 million plus recurring expenditure in there every year. But we chose, because this has been a good year for Tennessee, we got to pay off all our credit card, not just part of it. So we aren't paying interest on that credit card going forward. So we're putting $250 million into the pension fund that will bring us, keep us whole where we were, somewhere upwards of 90% funded. It will also allow us, if all things go well, to reap a little bit of recurring money from that fund in years going forward. So you can feel free to clap about that too. It's the third thing, that when you're looking at your family budget, you don't take on debt if you don't absolutely have to. Tennessee does not have to, and this budget does not include any debt. So those are the highlights. Y'all are getting the hang of it now. Thank you. Some other things that I'll just highlight that we're doing. There is included in this budget, we're providing raises for state employees. 2% of that is retroactive back to January 2021. So there's a total of a 4% raise for all of our hardworking state employees. We have provided $393 million for legislative initiatives. The biggest ones of those I've already mentioned, the $250 million into the pension plan. And I want to take just a second to talk about another very large one that is near and dear to my heart. It's funded in this budget. There will be a bill coming from behind the budget that we will talk more about on the floor. But we are going to finally fund our DSP workers. We're putting $39 million into this budget, recurring dollars, so that the folks who take care of our most vulnerable can get a raise and they can be paid $12.50 an hour. That's a huge improvement. They were at 10. The governor's budget brought them up to 10.50. It is not where we need to end. We won a battle. We haven't won the war. But I want to say thank you to so many people. There were over 60 people in this chamber on both sides who signed on to this bill. So, and it's noted, and we're funding it. There is $42 million in addition to the capital expenditures that were included in the governor's budget. There's $42 million for a TCAT in Shelbyville. And there are people on a waiting list for our TCATs across the state. There are people who want to go back to school, who want to develop a trade and get a certificate and be employed, and there are employers waiting to employ them. So it's really important. And in addition to this TCAT expenditure, there's also in the base budget, in the governor's budget, over $84 million for TCAT expenses, which would include some capital dollars, some personnel, and an upgrade. One of the things that when we talk about TCATs and new buildings and all that, sometimes we forget that the buildings aren't worth much if they don't have the equipment in them, and that equipment has to be upgraded so that the folks that we're sending out of the TCATs are able to have experience in working on the kind of technology and the kind of equipment that actually is in the workplace. There's, as we have already talked about, there's an enormous amount of federal funds coming into the state. $8.7 billion to state and local governments. $6.1 billion of this is coming to the state. There's 3 different rounds of federal education funding. So there, again, a lot of money, but we think that what we have tried to do with the help of our finance committee, of our finance team, of input from leadership and from input from all of you, we have tried to make sure that we are using those dollars in the best way to make an impact and a positive impact on Tennesseans' lives. I think that what none of us want to see is when these dollars go away, these additional dollars, and they will, we want to be able to point to differences that we made in Tennessee, ways that we improved the lives. And I forgot to mention another important key thing that we're doing in this budget. There is a $50 million sales tax holiday. In addition to our annual back-to-school holiday, there's another week's holiday for restaurants. 75% of the funding will go towards restaurant taxes. We know that industry has been hard hit during the pandemic. This hopefully will help Tennesseans get out, have a nice meal, and help our restaurants to recover. 25% of that $50 million will be allocated towards a rebate in food taxes. So we have a very difficult, when we attempt to give money back to Tennesseans with our tax structure, that's hard to do. Sales tax is the one place that we can make sure that we're getting some dollars back into every Tennessean's pockets. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would now appropriately renew my motion.
Very well. Representative Beck, I think you were next on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Sir yields.
First of all, thank you very much, Chair Lady Hazelwood and Chairman Cheek and Chairman Williams, for all that y'all have done. It's been an arduous task, and you've done a yeoman's job. Looking at the cities and counties funding, correct me if I'm wrong, but when it came out in the governor's budget, it was $200 million. Is that correct?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
That's correct.
Representative Beck.
And our friends across the hall reduced it to $100 million, or did we do that?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
That was a joint decision of the legislature.
Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And when we reduced it to $100 million, for some reason, Davidson County, Nashville, was capped at $5 million. Is that correct?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
That's correct.
Representative Beck.
And in my attempt at math, that's about $7 per citizen of Davidson County. And when I look at, for example, Pickett County, they're getting $50 per resident. And I'm failing to see the equity there. Can you straighten me out?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We use the same schedule, the same formula for these dollars as we used last year when we, because if you remember last year, we also gave cities and counties $100 million. But I think we all recognize that our metro areas have other resources that our rural areas do not. So we capped it. We used that same philosophy this year. And I might mention that although in the original proposed budget from the governor, there was $200 million for cities and counties. The revised proposal was $100 million, and that $100 million would be paid in January. What the legislature has done is provide these dollars, this $100 million. They will receive that. The cities and the counties will receive that as early as the checks can be cut in the new budget year, and there will be no strings attached. Previously, there were boxes around how the dollars could be spent. So while the cities and counties, the amount has been cut, they're getting it sooner, and they can use it in the way that they best determine rather than, the federal money comes with some strings. The state money before came with strings, but this time we're cutting those strings loose, and our local governments can, again, as I said, determine how best to use those dollars in their own communities.
Representative Beck.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. But when we boil it back, and you're correct, we're happy to help the rural districts, especially the depressed ones, with more funds. That's only the Christian thing to do as a county. But Davidson County has accounts for about 40% of the state's economic engine. And I just feel that it's a little punitive and not equitable to only allow for $7 a citizen, whereas several other are, over 6 or 7 times that. So I appreciate your consideration. Thank you very much.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
I would point out that the large metros can go directly. They have a direct line to the federal government. The other cities and counties, those funds are come through the state. So there are opportunities for additional funding for those metros and large cities that the others do not have. And that was another reason last year that we did the cap.
Representative Beck.
Thank you, Chair Lady, but I think you're referring to the CARES Act, and those funds came with strings on them, if I remember correctly, and not allocated without strings.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
That's correct. And hopefully the Davidson County and Metro Nashville will enjoy their $5 million unencumbered. Thank you for the word there, Chairman Williams.
Representative Beck.
Thank you very much.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, we are at unprecedented times here. We have unprecedented issues, and we have unprecedented resources made available to this state. And I believe that with all of that, we actually missed a golden opportunity to involve the minority caucus. I feel as if the supermajority decided that they would put together a budget, not involve the minority caucus at all, and then present it as the legislature has presented this budget. And Speaker, you know, I've mentioned this to you before. I expected that the minority would at least have access to the information before we got to committee. We didn't. My colleague mentioned it earlier. We got it, the leadership that is, at the same time every other member got it, and we did not have an opportunity to really have our values talked about in that budget. We did not have a seat at the table throughout the process as the deliberations was going on between the House and the Senate. And I just feel like by doing that, millions of Tennesseans' voices were silenced. I wasn't a part of the negotiations. I feel like millions of Tennesseans' values were not discussed. They could have been, but I don't know. I wasn't at the table. And I just have a problem with that. And thinking about the 1.9 billion we heard reference to that's coming down, if the procedures, which she said the procedures were what they were, are gonna remain the same, then that also means that the supermajority will decide without a full conversation with the minority caucus. And Mr. Chairman, I have a problem. Mr. Speaker, I have a problem with that. And I respect the chairman tremendously. I respect the budget chairman tremendously. But we were really virtually not at the table to have a full discussion about this budget, the way in the past we actually have had. And so I have concerns about that. I would hope that we are not so married or wedded to or narrowly focused on this concept of a physical conservatism where we don't even allow the voices of the minority to be heard. I believe in fiscal conservatism, but I wasn't at the table, and I take issue with that. And I would hope that as we move forward next year, that changes. I would hope that when this 1.9 come down, that changes. And the procedures include the voices of millions of Tennesseans that are represented by the minority caucus, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've had the, at sometimes unfortunate pleasure of serving on finance and being one of those people to leave late at night. But I do know the comments from the minority leader, I would say at best, concern me. I have seen this process happen for many years. I have been involved in the process several times. But the chair lady has done a fantastic job of communicating with the minority party. And so much so, we have emails, multiple emails from your office showing a different list or different things that you felt like were important as a follow-up to the many meetings that we had with the minority group. And so I think it's disingenuous for the minority leader to stand up here and say that she wasn't involved when there's an email chain that says otherwise. And so it's a little bit frustrating to see that. I know her heart is with her people, which is very well where it should be, but to say that you weren't involved is simply disingenuous at best. Thank you.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You are correct. Because in order to get to the table to have that conversation, I did have to send an email. She requested it, I sent it. I told her I'd send her our priorities. That's a true statement. But the process, as Madam Chair mentioned, and you've done an outstanding job, started in January, the conversation. That's when I'm saying we weren't at the table. We weren't. And that's a true statement. We weren't in the deliberations when the House was coming together to say, hey, we're going to come together in the House and we're going to fight for what we believe in with the Senate. We didn't do that. That's the part I'm talking about, Mr. Chairman. So you're right. I'm not disagreeing with that. But we could have had a different conversation, and I hope that going forward that we do. We have 1.9 billion that's coming. And I'm just saying we need to just communicate more with both sides of the aisle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the minority leader, great love and respect for you, not just because William Lambert tells me to say that, but I will say, the process for us really doesn't start as it relates to this budget document until we get all the data from the governor's office. That doesn't happen in January. We don't do that. We have our budget hearings and the governor has his budget hearings, but there's nothing going on until about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And that's why these folks work till 11, 12 o'clock at night. Well, not as bad this year because Chair Lady Hazelwood has a early turn-in time. But the truth of the matter is, you and I sat in every one of these committees. I'm on 2 finance subcommittees. I'm in the full committee. I'm on every one of the hearings. I'm come here on Mondays and through Thursdays to hear these hearings. You are as involved as you want to be. Charles Sargent used to tell me that all the time. You're as involved as you want to be. And you are involved, and I appreciate that. And if we can improve the process and make it better, I'm all for that. But to say that someone was left out or there was something nefarious just simply isn't true. Thank you.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wasn't indicating any nefarious activities was going on. The point I'm saying is more conversation is needed. And as we move forward, I expect that we'll hold true to that. And you did mention a friend of all of ours, Charles Sargent. And Charles had a lot of face-to-face throughout the process. He met, I'm not gonna go into that, but I appreciate your comments. I appreciate you, Madam Chair. You've done an outstanding job. You've ushered it through, and I'm actually proud to see you on the floor presenting it. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Parkinson. We'll go back. Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity. And Chair Lady, I appreciate the work you've done. I appreciate Chairman Hicks, Chairman Williams. I've been impressed with your leadership over this whole process. But I have a question about a specific issue with regards to unemployment. And if you could speak to any monies that are being appropriated to improve the unemployment system in Tennessee, because to this day, I continue to receive email, call, text from people across this state, and I know my colleagues do as well, about people who still are not getting unemployment claims processed in a timely manner. They're not getting calls back from the Department of Labor or Workforce. The process simply is not working for working families. And so I would hope that there's something in this budget to improve and beef up the unemployment resources in the Department of Labor and Workforce to improve the turnaround time for working families. So if you could address what's in the budget for the unemployment system and how we're going to improve that with all the monies that we're expending this year.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While there are no direct additional dollars in this budget into the unemployment fund, if you'll remember last year, we did put $40 million into that fund to make it self-sufficient so that we didn't have to go to our employers who were having a tough time already and ask them to pay more into that fund. And while that perhaps does not get to your point of direct family assistance, if those employers aren't able to pay into, if they have to pay into the fund, that's less money that they have to pay employees. It's fewer jobs that they're out there for those families to rely on. So again, there was $40 million from the federal funding that we got last year that went into that unemployment fund to make sure that employers could continue to afford to employ folks. There is $2.26 million for a reentry employment initiative with the Department of Labor. Again, not speaking directly to your issue, but those are dollars that are going to be used to make sure that employees can be retrained, can do what they need to do to be employable. There is also $2.14 million for the Department of Labor's apprenticeship program, again, to make sure. The goal, in my mind, the goal is not to make sure that we have unemployment dollars. I mean, that's important, but the goal is to make sure that we have people employed so that the unemployment dollars are not needed. And that's what these additional expenditures do.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate that. And the investments in the apprenticeship program and others are certainly important. The reality is the bulk of the monies being expended are federal dollars that are coming down, and our unemployment trust fund in Tennessee is flush with cash. There is no question about the amount of money that we have to pay. So I'm not really focused on that. My concern is the staffing and the efficiency and the manner in which the Department of Labor operates to turn these claims around, not the amount of money to pay the claims. Because right now, while I would love to see higher payments and longer unemployment, what we found last year was we had cut back personnel so far and reduced, the office to such an extent that once the perfect storm hit with this pandemic, we were caught having to completely reinvent the wheel. Our software system was wholly incapable of addressing all the claims. I want to know what we're doing to make sure that doesn't happen again, and that the list of people who are still filing unemployment because there's still high unemployment rates in the state of Tennessee. What are we doing to improve the system itself as far as upgrades, personnel, and the like to ensure that all of our constituents still reaching out to us for help as their last resort don't find themselves in this situation again?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And $1 billion, I want to make clear, $1 billion went into unemployment from the CARES Act last year, as you said. So the unemployment fund is flush. But to your point, we spent $40 million in Tennessee to upgrade systems so that our Department of Labor could better interact and better serve those Tennesseans who, through no fault of their own, found themselves unemployed. I would submit to you that nobody, no state, no country, nobody was prepared to handle the onslaught of unemployment claims that were dealt with. And our Department of Labor, with the new system, adding call centers, adding staffing, adding personnel. It's not perfect. I still get calls, just as I'm sure most of my colleagues do, when there are folks who fall through a crack and their unemployment claims take much, much longer than they should or that we would like for them to. But it is an ongoing improvement process. We are going to be much better prepared for the next onslaught, which I hope is far down the pike. And my hope is that we are going to continue the economic turnaround, and we're going to have fewer people attempting to call into our Workforce and Labor Department to secure unemployment funding. So while I will not take issue with your comment that there have been people who have waited far too long, it has been very difficult in some cases to get an answer or then to explain why the answer they got, if the answer was no, why it should have been yes. And I know that all of us have been involved in that very directly with legislative liaisons, and our assistants have spent a lot of time on that. But with the $40 million investment that we made last year to bump up, to improve, to set up the new system, to add employees, then I believe that we're getting there. We're digging out. It's like we had a flood and it takes a while to fully recover, but we are in recovery mode.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chair Lady. Again, I just want to thank you for your work on this. Chairman Hicks, Chairman Williams, again, been very impressed with the process to the extent, but like many of my colleagues, I view the budget as a moral document, and I want to make sure that we're investing and working as hard as we possibly can for hardworking families and addressing their core needs. There's a lot of things in this budget that I love, a lot of groups in my district and organizations in my district, Nashville, and across the state that I fully support in this budget. I just want to emphasize the importance of addressing and fulfilling our duties and carrying out those core functions of a government, especially a state government. So thank you for answering my questions. Thank you again for your hard work, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Well, thank you for those thank yous. And you mentioned families, so let me just take a moment to give you some specifics, to give all of us some specifics that we can talk about and be proud of what we've done in Tennessee to affect families. We have $3.6 million for adoption and subsidized government partnerships, $2.5 million for salary increases for DCS case managers. We know that's been an ongoing issue. We have cut restored funding that was cut when we left here last year, not knowing what the future was going to bring, and we did a bare bones budget. We cut the funding for CASA programs. That has been restored. Not only has it been restored, we're adding money so that they can add 4 new CASAs across the state. We have $320,000 additionally for child advocacy grants. We have money for additional safe baby courts and $100 million in federal funds for the children nutrition and national lunch programs. So that's in addition to hundreds of millions of other federal funding for child care support. So we are doing our best in Tennessee to make sure that Tennessee families have the resources that they need to raise their families, to be successful, and to be productive citizens.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the group up there, again, thank you for all your hard work. And what I'm about to address, I don't think was your idea. There's $450,000 in this budget for the comptroller's office. And what they're doing with it is they're creating positions for someone, just creating jobs for someone who needs one. I hope they're vetting these people quite well, but it's kind of funny to me. They're already sending out an invitation to the grand opening of the office in Memphis for these three people on Monday, May 17th. They're going to serve light refreshments, the invitation says, before we've even voted up here for these positions. I really don't like handpicking people and giving people jobs that may or may not be qualified, that may or may not have questionable things in their past before we even vote for them in the budget. So with that being said, I'm just putting on notice that this $450,000 is in the budget and people are looking at it. Thank you.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to point out that an enormous amount of federal funding, almost $9 billion, is coming into the state. Cities and counties are getting a lot of that money, some directly, some allocated pass-through from the state. Those federal dollars have to be used the way that the feds set the rules. If they're not used that way, when their audits happen, then those cities and counties or the state could be on the hook to pay those monies back, which would be quite difficult since by definition they've been spent. So the comptroller has the responsibility of working with all of our governments across the state, including our departments, make sure that those dollars are expended in a way that they should be. And it's a critical function. It truly is a critical function for us because we don't want to be here a year or two from now trying to figure out how we're going to pay back the funding that was spent in error. Also, there is those monies will help to make sure that we can prosecute fraud. Now, many fraud cases, if the number is small, it's just not viewed worth the effort by the district attorneys. This will allow those cases, because I would submit to you, whether you sell $2,000 or $200,000 from a government or a PTA or whatever, that should be prosecuted. That is morally, ethically, every way wrong. These dollars, this $450,000 allocation will help make sure that that can happen.
Representative Mitchell.
And Chair Lady, I totally agree with everything you said, especially the prosecute part, but the prosecutorial judgment of people they may be putting in this office may be what we're going to call in question. Thank you.
Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a couple questions for you. One is that over this last year, we've been in some unprecedented times, and we've done a really good job of being fiscally conservative and imprudent with our money. And right now, we have experienced an influx of cash. So we're flushed with cash right now as a state. We have a lot more money than we probably ever had as a state. And what my question to you is that, well, maybe not my question right now. I'm get to it. But the point is, we have a lot of people where jobs, healthcare is tied to jobs. And we've seen over this past year how a lot of people lost their job and they lost their healthcare. What's in this budget that is going to help those people that do not have healthcare, or the people who are the working poor that's struggling to afford healthcare and to stay afloat during these times while the state of Tennessee is so flush with cash?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have over $215 million in new spending on health care in this budget. There's $5 million insured can get care. We have $6.5 million in additional behavioral health safety net funding. And I might mention healthcare behavior, mental health is a huge issue, as we've heard discussed here. There's the $250 million mental health trust fund, $25 million of that, which will become immediately available this year. And then the interest is as the trust fund generates income. We have $2 million for tobacco prevention programs, which continues to be an issue in Tennessee. We have $11 million for additional choices slots so that folks that we have a waiting list of people who would prefer to stay in their homes, to be cared for in their homes. And it's a lot cheaper than being in a nursing home. So we are bumping that up. $10 million in additional funding for regional mental health institutes. And then we have already talked a little bit about this, but we have $4.5 million for statewide residential recovery courts. As we all know, drugs continue to be an issue. So that is, if you look at our budget, you know, I've heard it said many times, if you want to know where your heart is, look at your checkbook, see where your money goes. If you look at Tennessee's checkbook, you're going to see that money is going to education, money is going to healthcare. Those are our two huge issues in the state, and that's where we're prioritizing our dollars, and our budget reflects that.
Chairman Dixie.
Thank you for that response. But as we move forward, I just think that there's some more that we could be doing. We're funding things in budgets that potentially could happen next year. So for instance, we have a potential of $900 million that we could draw down for healthcare issues from this new administration. I didn't see any appropriations or any amendments, anything that addresses that in this budget. Those are the things that can really help people during this time to get them the healthcare they need during this unprecedented time and going forward.
Was that a question or was that just a statement? I think
No, my question is, is there anything in this budget that addresses that there are, or anything in this budget that has appropriated for this $900 million that we could possibly get over the next 2 years, that is our money that we're just not, it's just sitting there that we're not using?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
The healthcare expenditures I've outlined, and that is inclusive in this budget.
Chairman Dixie.
I'll take that as a no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Next up, Representative Calfee.
Call previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? I see none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 912 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast a vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Lamberth, aye. Hicks, aye. Hazelwood, aye. Faison, aye. Williams, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 76, 11 nays, 3 present, not voted.
Senate Bill 912, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1151 by Chair Lady Hazelwood and others relative to indexing. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill's on the desk.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 911.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 911 without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1511, Senate Bill 911 increases the amount by which state appropriations from state tax revenues for fiscal year 21-22 may exceed the index of estimated growth in the state's economy by $431.6 million or 2.37%.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves passage of Senate Bill 911 on third and final consideration by second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Hazelwood renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 911, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays, one present, not voting.
Senate Bill 911 received the constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1154 by Chair Lady Hazelwood and others relative to the statutory revisions required for the implementation of the Annual Appropriations Act. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 909.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 909, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 909 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves passage of Senate Bill 909 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Baum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the same as Senate Amendment number 1. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the Budget Implementation Bill, otherwise known as the BIMP. It makes the statutory changes that are necessary to implement the budget bill. With that, I would move passage.
Chair Lady Hazelwood renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 909 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Williams, aye. Hicks, aye. Hazelwood, aye. Campbell, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
Senate Bill 909 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1152 by Chair Lady Hazelwood and others relative to bond issues. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 910.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves to substitute conform to Senate Bill 910 without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Hazelwood.
I move passage of Senate Bill 910 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves passage of Senate Bill 910 on third and final consideration. Part section. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is the bond bill. This bill simply allows, while we fund our roads in Tennessee on a cash basis, pay as you go, sometimes projects have to be undertaken before we know the funds are coming in. But it's just like you have to get a short-term loan at home sometimes. You know your paycheck's coming, but you have something that you have to buy right away. This works the same way. It just allows the state to bond those dollars if necessary. I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Hazelwood renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, this is not addressed to y'all. This is addressed to TDOT. There's a lot of projects that were in that little bill for us to increase the gas tax that I voted for. And they're just not moving along very well. And I'm taking great notice of that. So putting them on notice, I can always bring amendments up here to give everybody an opportunity to vote to decrease that gas tax at any time. So I'm just put that on notice. Thank you.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, there were a couple of options that year on how to deal with that particular issue, and many folks have heard me talk about this before. This budget does not have specific allocations of surplus dollars to roads, but that is something that we should consider. So my friend from Davidson County has highlighted a very important point. When the gas tax bill passed, which I think folks know where I was on that time, it added about 10% to the road fund. In that time, construction costs have gone up significantly. Other needed projects have come along that needed to be funded, and it absolutely is not enough to completely pay for the needs that we have in our roads and bridges. So between this year and next year, and nothing against this budget because it is a phenomenal budget, but we do not need any new debt to do that. We simply need to use surplus dollars to pay for roads and bridges and infrastructure as defined by the traditional definition of infrastructure, not some of the stuff I hear bantied around in DC that is infrastructure. I'm talking roads and bridges. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 910, vote aye. When the bell rings, those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, one nay.
Senate Bill 910, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the appropriations calendar.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I took a moment earlier to thank our staff, but I really want to also please have you recognize again Chairman Hicks, Chairman Williams, and Vice Chairman Vaughn, who have really helped drive this process, along with Leader Camper, who's been an integral part of the Finance Committee. And I appreciate the support from all those on finance, the time that was spent, and I appreciate the opportunity to lead that effort. So thank you very much.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chair Lady, for thanking everybody else. But I think we need to make sure that we don't forget one very important person. And I do want to thank you for the hard work that you've put in. And we've already talked about this process doesn't start in January, folks. This process actually starts when we get out of here today. We'll start again. So I do want to say thanks not only to the staff and everybody, all the committees, but thank you, Chair Lady Hazelwood, for your leadership and your dedication to getting this budget all the way across the line.
Leader Lamberth.
Renew the calendar, right? Renew the calendar. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I make a motion to resume the regular calendar.
Mr. Clerk, call the next bill.
Mr. Speaker, at the time that the appropriations calendar was taken up, the House was ready to consider item 9. Item 9, that's House Bill 1319 by Representative Hardaway, relative to expunction. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Members, just FYI, we're going to go to about noon, and then we'll take a little recess. But our plan is to get as many of these out of the way to cut down on the amount of time when we come back, hopefully. Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I made a commitment to Leader Lambert that I would be finished by noon.
Noon Eastern?
Well played. Mr. Speaker, I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 965.
Representative Hardaway moves to substitute conform to Senate Bill 965, probably second. Without objection, so ordered. Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 965 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hardaway moves passage of Senate Bill 965 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 is in the Senate bill. Therefore, I move to withdraw House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Withdrawn. Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill, as amended, establishes that judges are required to provide notification if practicable, and requires the administrative office of the clerk, of the courts rather, to provide judges handling criminal cases with a list of convictions that are eligible for expunctions and their respective timelines. This effort is an effort to make information available that may motivate defendants, inspire their conduct to successfully complete their sentence, and begin that long journey, hopefully successfully, towards regaining their dignity and full citizenship, including voting rights and employment opportunities. It allows them to begin to visualize and rebuild their lives. With that, Mr. Speaker, pending any questions, I renew my motion.
Representative Hartway renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 965 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts their vote, does every member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 78, 10 nays.
Senate Bill 965 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 648 by Chairman Faison relative to digitizing documents. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Faison, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 832.
Chairman Faison moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 832, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage of Senate Bill 832 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Faison moves passage of Senate Bill 832 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment is the same as the Senate amendment. We move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Renew my motion.
Chairman Faison renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objections to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 832 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts a vote, does any member wish to change a vote? Moon aye. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, nay, 1 present, not voted.
Senate Bill 832 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 189 by Chairman Faison and others relative to distribution of beer. Mr. Speaker, Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to substitute conform to Senate Bill 177.
Chairman Faison moves to substitute conform Senate Bill 177, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 177 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Faison moves passage of Senate Bill 177 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same Senate Amendment number 1. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
No further amendments, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chairman Faison renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 177 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change a vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 75, 12 nays, 2 present, not voted.
Senate Bill 177 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1183 by Chairman Curcio relative to criminal procedure.
Chairman Curcio, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1183 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Curcio moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Curcio, Vice Chairman Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 clarifies that the credit for the time served applies to the concurrent probation sentence that are subsequently revoked. With that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Sexton moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Ms. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chairman Curcio renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1183 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
House Bill 1183 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 85 by Chairman Kumar and others, a resolution relative to the reclassification of marijuana under the Controlled Substance Act.
Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I move adoption of House Joint Resolution 85.
Chairman Kumar moves adoption. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption of Amendment number 1. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of Amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Joint Resolution 85 addresses an inconsistency and a contradiction in federal law. Marijuana, as we know, is from the cannabis plant, and it is a psychoactive substance that affects the human brain. Because of that effect, the Drug Enforcement Agency of the Department of Justice has classified this as a Schedule I substance. Schedule I substances are those that are known to have no medical benefit and high potential for abuse. However, on the other hand, the Food and Drug Administration, which is from the Department of Health and Human Services, has approved marijuana for use in certain conditions. As a result, the two agencies are in direct contradiction with each other. This joint resolution asks the Drug Enforcement Agency to reclassify marijuana so it is available for human use to the benefit of patients who need it, as well as open it up for research. With that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Kumar renews his motion. Any discussion? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quick question to the sponsor. You're suggesting that it's simple HJR, which is a good resolution. I'll support it. But could the President of the United States, through executive order, change the schedule of the drug? And or would it take an act of Congress to do that? And that's the question.
Chairman Kumar.
Representative Miller, I do not know what the legal situation with that is, but I would say that President of the United States at this time has expressed concern because of his personal and family experiences that he does not support legalization and that he believes it to be a gateway drug. But I think we want to focus on the positive use that can come to patients and do it in such a controlled way that the medical profession is involved in it.
Very good. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Dr. Kumar, thank you for bringing this resolution. We've passed similar resolutions in the past, and there's been a little kind of side conversation. And I know we've had multiple bills on this subject, but I mean, reclassification is the appropriate thing to do at the federal level. It is a states' rights issue. It allows our doctors and our states to decide how we want to address this particular substance, and for our doctors to decide in medical science whether or not there are any medicinal qualities within the cannabis plant, which there have been medications that are out there derived from that. So this is a very appropriate resolution, and Dr. Kumar, thank you for bringing it.
Chairman Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. I appreciate your support. Once again, we want to do the right thing. We want to protect our public, we want to help our patients, and we want to open it up for research. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 85 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change the vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 81, 6 nays.
House Joint Resolution 85 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1045 by Chairman Kumar, relative to health-related licensing. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on desk.
Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to
substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 212.
Chairman Kumar moves substitute conform to Senate Bill 212, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 212 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Kumar moves passage of Senate Bill 212 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adoption of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 212 or House Bill 1045 deal with public protection and safety from providers who have been indicted or have committed offenses against the Controlled Substances Use or sexual criminal offenses. It is applied in 4 parts. The first part is that a licensing authority of a healthcare prescriber, when they learn that the prescriber has been indicted, they proceed to limit the prescriber's license. Secondly, failure of a healthcare provider to comply and have in place collaborative agreement, if they are required to do so, will lead to suspension of the license. Thirdly, if there is a disciplinary action by the licensing board against a healthcare provider, their license will be limited. And fourthly, the CEOs of healthcare facilities are required to report actions that result in disciplinary consequences for incompetence, neglect, moral failure, or substance abuse and diversion. With that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Kumar renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 212 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Lamberth, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Bill 212, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 582 by Chairman Terry.
Chairman Terry, at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to roll this to Monday's regular calendar.
Without objection, roll to Monday's regular calendar. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 565 by Chairman Dixie and others relative to professions of the healing arts. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Dixie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bills 410.
Chairman Dixie moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 410, probably second without objection. So ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 410 on third and final consideration.
Representative Dixie moves patches of Senate Bill 410 on third and final consideration. Mr. Clerk, please call up the First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of adoption of House Amendment number 1 say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Dixie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Currently, dentists have the authority to administer the COVID-19 vaccines in 28 states. By putting this authority into statute, dentists would no longer depend on federal action or executive order and could begin planning and implementation of continuing education programs, including ordering and storage types of vaccines, administration and possible side effects, along with all regulatory reporting requirements. With this explanation, I renew my motion.
Representative Dixie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 410 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Lamberth, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 79, 12 nays, 2 present, none voting.
Senate Bill 410 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. I object to the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 705 by Representative Russell and others relative to vapor products. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1047.
Representative Russell moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 1047, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1047 on third and final consideration.
Representative Russell moves passage of Senate Bill 1047 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Amendment 1 by Representative Russell. Mr. Speaker, it was timely filed.
Representative Russell, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment Number 1.
Representative Russell moves adoption of House Amendment Number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection to a voice vote? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting House Amendment Number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 1047 adds vaping to the Non-Smoker Protection Act. As a result, vaping will now be prohibited in the same places that smoking is prohibited, and it treats vaping in the same manner as tobacco in the preemption section of the code. In other words, the state will regulate the vaping policy with respect to where vaping is allowed to have uniformity across the state. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Russell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And here we go again. We've had the same comment, and because of the challenges of this bill, it's gone back through changes. It's been pulled off notice, and I'm going to say again what my concern is here. We have a problem with the youth in our state vaping. And municipalities have created what they believe to be reasonable regulations to try to limit the gateway flavors of vaping so that children are not encouraged and enticed to vape. There was a study done that showed that 25% of high school students had vaped in the last 7 days. 25%. There was another study that showed that 15% of middle schoolers had vaped in that same period. We have businesses and companies that are producing vape flavors that are intentionally meant to entice young kids to start vaping, to get addicted to nicotine, to get addicted to buying more vape products. Bubble gum, cotton candy, Tutti Frutti. These are not vaping flavors that are meant for adults and people that have a right to do this if they so choose. And if we pass this bill, it removes the ability of local municipalities to limit those flavors, to limit the amount of nicotine that's in there. I know that people say that this is just for adults and let adults decide, but children are getting their hands on it, and these flavors are meant to entice kids to start doing it. I urge everyone to vote against this, and with that, thank you very much.
Representative Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Currently, you can't vape under 21, so that's a enforcement issue. Currently, the flavors are already being regulated by the federal government starting in January of 2020, so they already do that. And as far as the locals being allowed to regulate it, they can still regulate it, but they would have to come to the legislature just like smoking. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, sponsor. To reiterate the concerns of my colleague here, we went through this once before we sent this back from the House floor, and I'll again raise the issue Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a playground or a park in your district, this bill is going to require your government by a vote of 2/3 to prohibit it. Why would we want to increase the threshold to prohibit smoking or vaping on a playground at the local government level? 2/3 of the body will have to do this. And if you think these companies that own the vaping products aren't coming at your local governments, can do everything they can to kill those bills, should you try to protect children on playgrounds, you're mistaken. There's too much money at stake for them. Big Tobacco's bought these vaping companies. They're going to come and they're going to flip that county government, and you're going to have vaping everywhere. 2/3 is a ridiculous amount of votes to require to prohibit smoking on a playground. Also, regulates urban park centers. As I said last time this bill came to the floor, there's 8 pages in the Tennessee Code annotated committed to the definition of an urban park center. Each and every one of you most likely has property that families attend or visit that qualifies under that definition. And now we're increasing the threshold to protect the public safety, health, and welfare of families with this legislation under the guise of what has been represented from the well today. This is inappropriate. This is a threat to the public health. Let's not bend over and just do whatever Big Tobacco wants us to do. They're usurping local authority to protect families. Let's send this back where it came from. Vote no. Thank you.
Representative Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a benefit to public health because I also agree that you shouldn't vape on greenways and playgrounds. And when we pass this, we'll also have House Bill 1028 on the calendar on Monday, and it adds greenways and playgrounds or anywhere someone under the age of 21 can access can't vape. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Powell, did I see your hand up earlier?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I don't want to belabor the point. I do agree with the comments made by my colleagues. But just one other issue here is, as recently as a couple of years ago, a study on these different vaping products found that 95% of these came from China. So we're talking about a product in vaping, the majority of which comes from China. And I would argue that a lot of people do not know what is in these products they're putting in their body. They could have harm that can never be reversed to your lungs. And so when you're talking about a product where 95% of it comes to China and benefits their economy, then that gives me great reservation, because we can't guarantee the safety of those products here in our own country. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a final concern for you to take into consideration when you vote on this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That don't have anything to do with this. This don't have anything to do with where it comes from. It's just where it regulates where you can and can't vape and who does the regulations here.
Representative Powell, is there anything else? No, sir. Chairman Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I certainly share the sentiments expressed here that vaping is dangerous. Teenagers can get addicted to nicotine, and that is not what we want in our society. I do have legislation that will be, I'm not sure if it will be Monday, but it will be next week. It is has to pass through full finance. And that legislation allows local authorities and local municipalities by ordinance to prohibit use of smoking and vaping products in public parks, greenways, and other open spaces where minors are likely to visit. And with that complement, I think we are accomplishing the ends that we need to do for our Tennesseans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just curious, are there any organizations like the American Cancer Society, the Heart Association, the Lung Association. Are any of those organizations supporting this bill?
Representative Russell.
So don't think any of them probably are. They didn't come to me during the committee process, so you'll have to contact them to find out.
Representative Mitchell.
I think that tells everybody anything you need to know about this bill. But I would ask you, since Senator Kumar has got a solution to some of the problems some people have spoken of, why don't we roll your bill to beyond Kumar's, if it's such a for the public health?
Representative Russell.
I respectfully request we don't do that, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1047 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings in favor. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 57, 29 nays, 2 present, not voted.
Senate Bill 1047 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk. Members, we're going to try to get 2 more in, then we'll take a break.
House Bill 1252 by Chairman Faison and others relative to torts. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1370.
Chairman Faison moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments in file?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1370 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Faison renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1252, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 69, 20 nays.
Senate Bill 1370 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 490 by Representative Cooper, a resolution to recognize Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Day, May 6, 2021.
Chairman Faison.
Mr. Speaker, can we roll this to the Hill?
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 501 by Chairman Williams, a resolution to honor and commend Steve Moore of Cookeville for his contributions to the state of Tennessee.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Joint Resolution 501.
Chairman Williams moves adoption, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Joint Resolution 501. I renew my motion.
Chairman Williams renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 501, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Faison, aye. Hardaway, aye. Camper, aye. Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91 nay.
Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91 nay.
House Joint Resolution 501, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare adopted without objection. The motion and reconsider is tabled. Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And at this time, I believe after the budget and everything else we've discussed, it is a good opportunity to recess until 1:15 for lunch. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to recess until 1:15, members.
Without objection, recess till 1:15.